So after the kinetic friction, we have another type of friction, that is the rolling friction. Rolling friction. Rolling means the body that rolls. So what will be the definition of the rolling friction? That we can say it is produced when the motion of a rolling body on a surface occur, then that called rolling friction. Rolling friction. Simple is that when the body rolls on the surface, the friction produced on that time, that called a rolling friction. First we will know the limiting friction, that if a body is moving on the surface, so that on the straight lines, that were limiting friction. If the body is moving on the surface, any moving object, or we can say rolling object that moves on the surface, that friction is produced on the rolling object, that is called a rolling friction. Basically it is having low contact area. You can see here, suppose that this is the surface, right, and this is any suppose that this is any ball, right? So when it will move like this, it will move here, so it will move like this, right? So it is having low contact area. That contact of area will be low towards the surface. Basically the rolling friction is very much smaller than the sliding friction and the limiting friction. It is having low value, we can say. If the weight of the body is same, then the rolling friction is less than the sliding friction and limiting friction, because it is having low contact area of the friction, so that's why it is counted as a smaller value than the other friction. After that we are having another type of friction, that is a fluid friction. Fluid friction. Now what is a fluid friction? Basically the resistive force experienced by solid material in the fluids. If we talk about the fluids, here we are talking about the general terms, right? General terms that will be like honey, water, paste. So these are the, we can say, general. We are also taking here as a gas, and we can see that gas we are also taking, that will be in the general fluid, right? So the resistive force experienced by the solid material in the fluids is called fluid friction. What does mean by that? Suppose that here we are having any container. This is a container, right? And here one we are having the solid material, and in this we are having water, right? So in this, when this will move down, it will be having weight, right? And if it will come here, this is a solid material, this one material is this, so the upthrust force is present in this water, that will move this surface towards the upward. Upthrust force. What is the upthrust force? You can see the name upthrust, which means the force that push substance towards the upward side. So that's why it's known as upthrust force, that is present in the fluids, right? It's also present in the air. So this is the upthrust force. So when upthrust force will be pushing that substance towards upward, and this weight is pushing that substance toward downward side, so the weight and the upthrust force will be equal, so that substance will move in the uniform velocity, right? When these both will be equal, then the substance, that is solid substance, that will be move in the uniform velocity, right? we have also discussed this in the previous lectures. If we can say weight is greater than the upthrust force, then this substance will move, we can say, fast, and if the upthrust force is greater than the weight, then it would be the slow, right? After that, it also depends upon the viscosity. Viscosity, right? Because as we know that, as I mentioned, that water, paste and honey, as we know, honey has a more viscosity than the water, so it is also dependent upon the viscosity, right? After that, we are having one substance that called the drag force, one force that called the drag force. Now what is the drag force? Basically, it is also known as the upthrust force. Retarding force experienced by object in a fluid is called drag force. Retarding force. What is the retarding force? Retarding force. Basically, retarding word used for the opposite. It is used for the opposite, right? Retarding force experienced by object in a fluid is called drag force. Basically, drag force is another name of the upthrust force. It is also known as the upthrust force, right? That's why it's also known as a drag force. After that, we are having 4 factors in which the fluids are, we can say, dependent. Number 1 is the size of the material. Number 2 is the shape. Number 3 is the velocity of a substance, velocity, and number 4 is the viscosity, as I discussed here. Viscosity, right? After that, in fluid friction, we have one law called the Stokes law. He was a scientist that made one law. He gave one statement about the fluids, right? In the fluids, or we can say viscosity, right? So we will discuss about the Stokes law. What is mean by what the statement given by the Stokes, that was a, if we talk about the statement, that retarding force, he said that retarding force experienced by spherical metallic sphere is directly proportional to the radius, velocity and viscosity. It is same point that I've discussed before, but this law all gave that a statement that retarding force experienced by a spherical metallic sphere. This is a solid, right? A spherical metallic sphere is directly proportional to the retarding force, velocity and viscosity, right? After that, suppose that this is a friction, right? Fluid friction is directly proportional to the radius, velocity, and this is a sign of viscosity, velocity, and this is a radius, right? So Fs is directly proportional to the radius, velocity and viscosity. So Fs is equal to the A velocity, and this basically A is a coefficient, right? It's a coefficient. So, and the A is equals to the 6 pi. So the Fs is equals to the 6 pi radius, velocity, and this we can say viscosity. Basically, this is pronounced as a eta. Right? So this is basically the given by this Stokes law, that Fs is equal to 6 pi Rvn. We are using this when we are talking about the fluid friction, right? So that was about the friction, and this is the last we can say statement about the friction.